expert on Israeli affairs. Normally, when an expert on Israeli affairs is interviewed, it is actually an Israeli who is interviewed. Today, we intend to look at it from a different perspective. An American who has taken up residence in Israel and who truly is an expert on Israeli affairs. We welcome to our program today Dr. Fred Lazon, who graduated from the University of Chicago with his PhD in political studies and is presently Associate Professor, Department of Behavioral Sciences at Ben-Gurion University. Dr. Lazon, welcome to our program.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here in Chicago after many years of not being here and being living in Israel. I left Chicago in 1971 to go to New York, and then in 75 to Israel. And whenever I come back to the city, I guess I'm overwhelmed most by the cold weather and the architecture, which is very exciting.
Dr. Lazon, first of all, why? Why did you go from being a young man in America to taking up residence in Israel?
Well, it started many, many years ago. I grew up in the suburbs around Boston. I was born in Boston in 1943. And when I was in high school, I was very, very active in a Zionist youth movement called Young Judea. And the goal of Young Judea, which at that time was sponsored by Hadassah and the ZOA, was self-fulfillment, which might be a catchy phrase, but the idea was that one doesn't have to go to live in Israel necessarily, as in some of the other movements, but one should feel fulfilled as a Jew and do whatever one has to do in order to be fulfilled. I went to their summer camp programs, and when I graduated high school in 1961, I went to Israel on a year program. And it was a very, very exciting experience. We spent 4 months in Jerusalem. We then went to kibbutz for 3 months in the northern Galilee, and in those days we actually worked right below the guns of Syria, so to speak. And near the end of the year, there was actually an air attack on the kibbutz, which was a very frightening experience, but fortunately nothing happened. Then we went to a moshav for a month, and then after that, I had a really unique experience for that time in Israel. I went to live in a development town. This is in about 1961, 62. I lived in a town called Kiryat Gat, working with immigrants from Morocco and immigrants from India. And at that time, I made up my mind, at least I thought I made up my mind, that I would go back to the United States, get a degree in social work, and then come to Israel to work with these new immigrant groups. As it turned out, that's not what happened, because I left Israel at the end of the year in 1961. I then came back to the United States, got a BA, and in 1966 I came to the University of Chicago, where I spent 5 years in political science. And I graduated in 1971, went to New York. I taught at the City University, the John Jay College of Criminal Justice. And then I met my wife in 1973. In 75, we decided to go back to Israel.
Now, your wife was an American?
No. My wife actually comes from the other half of the world, or the other side of the world. My wife was born in Iraq. And in fact, her father was one of the few Jewish people who had a very important position in the police of Iraq. And they lived in Iraq through 1951. When most of the Jews left Iraq, they did not leave. The father had stayed on. And then finally realized that they had no future. There were no future for Jews in Iraq. So they decided to take a trip to Turkey, Istanbul. He told his wife, my mother-in-law, get the 3 children ready, pack a suitcase, leave every picture in the house. Because they were afraid that if they go to the airport with all their pictures and with all their belongings, they might not be allowed out of the country. So in 1951, she came to Israel, lived in a very, very poor neighborhood around Tel Aviv, and became an Israeli.
So it's been 14 years that you've lived constantly in Israel?
Yes, more or less. I mean, the only qualification is, as a professor at an Israeli university, usually every 4 to 6 years we go on sabbatical, which is to more or less plug us into what's happening in academia around the world. That might be one of the reasons why many of our academic institutions are amongst the best in the world. So I spent 1979, 1980, and 1986, 87 at UCLA in California.
As a visiting professor?
As a visiting professor. The first time I went, I was a little younger, so I was defined as a visiting scholar in the School of Architecture and Urban Planning, primarily in urban planning. One area which I've done a lot of research, I actually started my academic career in Chicago looking at public housing and the Gautreaux case, which I'm sure is familiar to most residents of Chicago. And so when I went to UCLA the first time, I worked in the School of Architecture and Urban Planning.
Let me just stop you for 1 second.
Sure.
There are many people listening who are not familiar with that case. Can you fill us in just a little bit?
Okay, well, at that time, there were many people in Chicago that were associated with the Chicago Housing Authority, but there was a suit brought about by there's a public interest law firm called Businessmen for the Public Interest. they filed a suit with other organizations, including at that time the American Jewish Congress, charging the Chicago Housing Authority with deliberate racial discrimination against black people. Basically saying, if I can recall this, that the Housing Authority discriminated against blacks in terms of where public housing was built and in terms of tenancy regulations. And so that's what I began my academic career. So when I came to UCLA the first time, we looked at Section 8 housing, which is another government program where units were rented in private dwellings, and I looked at those policies.
Now, what changes have you noticed? What are the most dramatic changes between living in America and living in Israel?
Well, I guess the most dramatic change and the most different change, when I went there, it was a little deceptive, I have to admit, because I went as an academic. And I came into the country in 1975. We went to an immigrant absorption center, which is a very interesting experience. And the day after we got there, my wife stayed in the absorption center with our 2-month-old child at the time. We now have 3 children. And I went to the university. So when I went to the university, it was like going to the university in the States. It was like doing the same type of thing. And in that sense, it was deceptive, although the universities, of course, were very, very different. However, the basic difference was I was in a Jewish country. I was in a country where most of the people were Jewish, where Jewish tradition was more important, and it was sort of like a country with a Jewish character, which you don't have any other place, and that had its various effects on me. I would say more positive than negative. One of the changes which is taking place, and this might be a topic which I'll comment on a little later more in depth, is the culture kampf, the basic struggle taking place in Israel between Orthodox and non-Orthodox Jews. Because if we say Israel is a Jewish country, there's always been a consensus in Israel amongst most of its residents that we basically want to have a Jewish state. As to what should be the character of that state, there's never been an agreement. And to some extent, an understanding of who is the Jew issue today, it reflects this struggle between various groups of people who would like to define what type of Jewish state Israel should be.
Now, from your own background, were you from a Orthodox type of background?
No, I lived in a town where there was a small Orthodox shul and there was a conservative temple which we belonged to. I went to a conservative Hebrew school.
As long as you've touched on the subject regarding the conflict between Orthodox Jews and other Jews, what effect does that have on everyday life in Israel?
Well, from the point of view of being an Israeli, and today I'm a citizen of Israel, I serve in the Israeli army.
You maintain a dual citizenship?
I have dual citizenship. I find one of the most difficult things to adjust to living in Israel, coming from the United States, fairly liberal, open society. Israel is also democratic, but when it comes to the issue of religion, I find it very, very oppressive. I find it very difficult at times, because one does really not have, within degree, freedom of choice. Now, I want to put everything into the proper perspective. I live in a small town called Omer, O-M-E-R, which is a suburb outside of Beersheba. We have about 1,200 families. We have a conservative synagogue. In Hebrew, it's called the Masorti Synagogue. Our synagogue is funded by the local municipality, the way the Orthodox, the Young Israel Synagogue is funded. We have 3 or 4 different synagogues. I go, no one bothers me. My son was bar mitzvahed there. He's considered that he is bar mitzvahed. Where the lack of freedom comes, when it comes to getting married, if you're Jewish, it has to be with an Orthodox rabbi. When you want to get buried, it usually means, although there are some exceptions to this now, that the Orthodox rabbi has to perform it. They have a monopoly when it comes to being Jewish on religious matters affecting Jewish people, although in all fairness, there are cracks in the system. And when I say cracks in the system, I mean this in a positive way. We have conservative synagogues, Reform synagogues, although of course they're in the minority. But when one has to register, when a child is born, those that decide who is Jewish and who is not Jewish, that's part of the Orthodox establishment.
All right. Now, is this conflict apparent? Are there riots? Are there upheavals? Or is it subtle type of problems that are noticed?
Often, I would say, generally speaking, it's more subtle than not. Although we have had in the city of Jerusalem very violent demonstrations which have seriously injured people. I mean, one talks about who throws rocks in Israel, and I realize that's a very sensitive issue, and we shouldn't joke. But there are ultra-Orthodox, what I would consider to be extremist Jews, who believe it's perfectly legitimate to throw rocks at automobiles that are driven on Sabbath by Jewish people. In the past, people have been hospitalized, seriously injured. Now, I might say that these are the extreme Orthodox elements. Most Orthodox in Israel and most non-Orthodox more or less live and let live. But there have been demonstrations in Jerusalem with rock throwing, in several towns around Tel Aviv when movies were shown on Friday night. In Israel, we only have one day of rest, the Sabbath, Saturday. Friday night's a night which people can go out and, let's say, sleep the next day. Many Israelis, if not most Israelis, would like to relax on Friday night, either watch television or go to a movie or do something else. Traditionally, most movie theaters have been closed. The last couple of years, more and more movie theaters are opening on Friday night, and they had some very serious demonstrations, not really riots, in the Tel Aviv area against these movie theaters, but these demonstrations stopped about 8 months ago.
Now, how about in the political spectrum? Is the Orthodox movement felt in the political arena?
Without a doubt. But the Orthodox movement in Israel is organized along political lines. They form political parties, and they play politics. I mean, this is the city of Chicago. I don't want to mention any names because I realize there's a campaign going on. We all know His Honor and Richard Daley in Chicago politics and everything that happened in Chicago politics. Politics can get dirty. Very few people in politics really have clean hands. I'm a political scientist. So in Israel, you have the phenomenon of ultra-Orthodox Jews organized in a political party, and they play the same political games as everyone else, which some people find reprehensible. But what I'd like to say is, there's a whole spectrum of different Orthodox parties. You have ultra-Orthodox parties that are very committed to the state of Israel, want to see Israel as a Jewish state, a Zionist state, a state open for all Jews, Orthodox and non-Orthodox. You have others who would like to impose their will on all of us and turn us all into Orthodox Jews and make the country fairly Orthodox. They're in the minority. They tend to be extremist. But the one point that I'd like to say, I'd like to make two comments here because this is what I know best. One is, we have a professor at our university, Ben Gurion University, named Pinchas Pelly. Many people read his articles in the Jerusalem Post every week. He made a very interesting comment when he said, the Jewish religion divides us. The Torah is what unites us. And it is the Jewish people, being one, we have many different versions of our religion. That divides us. It doesn't unite us. That's one factor, and we see it in Israel and we see it in world Jewry. The other thing is, and this is something I would say to Americans, where often the Americans say to us, American Jewry says to us, and they said to our political leaders, you don't understand us. If you understood us, you never would have passed who is a Jew, or you never would have proposed who is a Jew or given it any support, which is probably correct. I would say to a great degree, many Israeli Jews, including some of our leaders, don't really understand what American Jewry is all about. By the same token, many American Jews don't understand what Israel is all about. And let me just give one example on who is the Jew issue. I have a neighbor. My neighbor is non-religious, never goes to synagogue. He might go maybe on Yom Kippur. Doesn't observe the holidays in a religious way. He went to the United States. He was sent by his company. He's a chemical engineer. Spends a year out in Colorado someplace, Denver, Boulder, one of those cities. Comes back and he catches me outside in my yard. We're neighbors. And he says, you wouldn't believe what we did. I said, what happened? He said, when we got there, we went to services in a Reform temple. They played music. There was an organ. Men and women sat together. He laughed. He thought it was funny. He said we couldn't relate to it. Yet here's a man who can't relate to Orthodox Judaism, yet he sees Reform Judaism as being something strange, something different, something perhaps leading to assimilation. And the point that I'd like to make is that what you find in Israel is that many people, many of you non-religious Jews, pay a tremendous amount of deference to Orthodox Judaism. When you ask them, what's the Jewish religion, they say the Orthodox. And if I can get very personal, my son, as I mentioned before, was bar mitzvahed in a conservative synagogue. My wife's parents from Iraq, when they came to the Friday night service, which my son led, when we came home, they were very upset. And what were they upset about? They never in their lives had ever seen a Jewish religious service where men and women sat together. And it bothered them. And many people in Israel have never seen these things, don't know what Reform is all about. They see it as something strange, something different, something which they don't identify with. And it's a problem.
So it's more or less Orthodox or nothing?
Orthodox or nothing, without a doubt.
Something I've always wondered about. Americans send a lot of money to Israel. American tourists go to Israel, and sometimes they wonder how they are perceived by the Israelis. I'm talking about tourists. How does the Israeli look upon, so to speak, the average American? Is it the ugly American, or is it a friend? Is it a brother?
I don't think we have this. I don't think we have this sense in Israel of the ugly American or even the ugly American tourist. Now, Israelis see America as its best friend in the world. I mean, Israelis are very, very conscious and very, very appreciative of all the aid we get from the United States government. We know that our Air Force today is the best in the Middle East and one of the best in the world, and we know that what contributes to that great Air Force, besides our own sons and our fathers and our brothers who are trained, they fly American planes, and they're the best in the world. And we appreciate all of that. At the same time, we also appreciate, most Israelis appreciate very, very much, the interest and concern of American Jewry towards the state of Israel, and the sense that we are one people, and that Israel belongs, in a certain sense, to every Jew. Of course, one would make a distinction between those Jews that choose to live in Israel and those Jews that choose not to live in Israel. Now, tourism is very, very important today for more reasons than one. And one of the reasons is it's a basic part of our economy today. It's a major industry, major moneymaker for the country. Now, today, when we're being threatened by an intifada, this uprising.
What is intifada exactly?
The intifada is the uprising. I'd like to come back to that just in a second, but
sure,
the point that I want to make before we actually go into that is the fact that when we're being threatened today, our life is being threatened, our survival is being threatened, our economy is being threatened. One of the chief weapons the Arabs have against us is to affect tourism. So today we see a decline in tourism. And one of the factors which comes home is when we look at the figures, Europeans still come to Israel, vacation to Israel. You can walk around, if you can walk around on State Street in Chicago, you can walk on any street, downtown Chicago in the Loop, you can walk on any street in Israel within the Green Line. I'm not talking about the occupied territories or Judea and Samaria. It's a very, very safe country. And one of the things which is slightly disappointing for a lot of Israelis are that many American Jews have decided to come a little less often. So if one wants to fight the intifada, support Israel, visit Israel.
So it really is a misconception that it's dangerous to go to Israel.
Without a doubt. But, let me put it this way. Anything can happen anywhere in the Western world. When I went to Israel the first time, not the first time, when I went to Israel in February of 1975 to look for a job, where I eventually got at Ben Gurion University, I was teaching at John Jay College of Criminal Justice in New York. One of my colleagues, a Korean American, said to me, "But your wife is pregnant. How can you take her to Israel?" Okay? Went to Israel. We were there for 2 weeks. Went from one end of the country to another. There's no violence, no terrorism, nothing. During that 2-week period, some Puerto Rican terrorists planted a bomb in downtown Manhattan on Wall Street. 2 Americans were killed in downtown Wall Street. I mean, anything could happen. I mean, there could be terrorism in Israel. There can be terrorism any place in the world. It's basically safe.
Intifada. Tell us what it is and what the situation is.
Okay, well, the intifada is, of course, the uprising by the Palestinians. Some people see it as a rebellion. They basically want us out of the territories. Now, the territories, which I'll talk about in a second, didn't come to us because we necessarily wanted them. One has to look in a historical perspective, going back to 1967 when the Sinai was demilitarized in the hands of the Egyptians. There was a UN force between us. Nasser brought 150,000 troops into the Sinai, made the announcement that they're on their way to Tel Aviv. We struck first. We had a war which lasted 6 or 7 days, which most people are familiar with. And as a result of that, our army went all the way to the Jordan River, went all the way to the Suez Canal, and also took the Golan Heights, which had threatened our settlements. Following the 1967 war, the official government position of Israel was, and over the years, we annexed the area around Jerusalem. We made Jerusalem a united city, and we also annexed, several years ago, the Golan Heights. The rest of the territory which was occupied in that war is considered by the Israeli government occupied territory. Why is it occupied territory? Because the official policy of all our governments has been, this is temporarily in our hands. And only time will tell. If someone is willing to negotiate with us, then we'll have peace. Now, the official Israeli government position is to refer to the West Bank, and that's the part of Israel which is west of the Jordan River, part of Israel, the part of the British Mandate of Palestine, as we refer to it as Judea and Samaria, the biblical area. Now, in this area, we have a lot of Jewish settlements, and the Palestinians living in this area are having an uprising. One should understand about an uprising is not a kid's game. It's very serious business. We see there have been several hundred casualties. Most of the casualties have been Palestinians, but Jews have been killed. When people throw rocks, it's not the kids on the street corner throwing a rock at a car going by, but it's throwing rocks to kill. When you drop cinder blocks off of roofs on soldiers walking by, even if you have a helmet on, you get a cinder block in your head, you're crippled for the rest of your life.
It's interesting that in the American newspapers, especially I believe it was approximately a year ago now, it was portrayed sort of like David and Goliath, with David being the Palestinians throwing stones, and Goliath, of course, being the Israelis with their big tanks. Is that...
Okay, well, first of all, we don't use any tanks on the West Bank or in the territories. But one of the problems that took place, without a doubt, I would say that, without a doubt, the Israelis were surprised. And what I mean by Israelis being surprised, our leaders were surprised, the army was surprised, and in the beginning, no one knew how to cope with this situation. I would also say that Mr. Arafat and the PLO were also surprised. Arafat was much like Lenin. Lenin, when he made his revolution in the Soviet Union in 1917, he made the revolution. When the revolution started, he was sitting in Switzerland writing a dictionary. When the Intifada started, Mr. Arafat was jetting around the world, staying in some five-star hotel, pushing, quote, the Palestinian cause. And there's a lot of bitterness against him by Palestinians living on the West Bank or in the occupied territories. And as a consequence of that, we really didn't know how to cope with the Intifada. And unfortunately, because there's been a lot of suffering, a lot of it has been touch and go. A lot of it has been touch and go, trying to find a way in which you can deal with this situation. But I would say that what one should realize, we're human beings. Our army is an army made up of citizens, civilians who are in reserve duty, as well as the regular soldiers. I think that most people that serve in these territories don't enjoy it. However, we just can't fold up our tents and go home. We fold up our tents and we go home, then we're still going to have the same problems. They'll just come closer to our own homes. We have to resolve this issue. Now, Mr. Shamir and Mr. Rabin, one is our Prime Minister and one is our Defense Minister, made an interesting proposal. About 3 weeks ago, they suggested, let's stop the Intifada, calling on the Palestinians, stop the Intifada, and we will negotiate. They didn't really clearly define what do they mean by negotiate or with whom, but that was the statement. Mr. Frege, who is the Christian mayor of Bethlehem, the largest Christian community in the territories, saw the message, heard them, and called a press conference. Had a press conference and said, let's accept Shamir's offer. As a Palestinian, he was speaking. Let's stop the Intifada, negotiate with the Israelis, and see if Shamir is sincere. What happened the next day? Mr. Arafat, jetting around the world with his, he dresses with his keffiyeh, and he looks like he needs a shave and all of that. It's a certain image.
Always stubble, right?
Yeah, always stubble, but somehow the American media sometimes, and I don't mean to pick on the American media, which is usually, in my opinion, and most people here don't agree with me, I think is very understanding of Israel and its problems, although they often want sensational things. They often don't focus on his bodyguards who are wearing Gucci shoes and suits of costing a great deal of money. But this is Mr. Arafat. But what was Arafat's statement in response to Mr. Frege? Palestinian brothers that call for a cessation to the Intifada should beware that they will receive the bullets of their people in their chests. In other words, there's a clear threat. You talk about stopping the Intifada, negotiating with the Israelis, you'll be shot down. The next day, Mr. Frege withdrew his offer. So this is a statement coming from the moderate Palestinian.
By the same token, I've noticed with Gorbachev, glasnost, it's an open policy, it's a great PR type of campaign. And even with Arafat, his speech before the United Nations, it draws applause. There are some that think he's changed his colors. What is the situation with Arafat? Is he still the same person that we thought he was before? Okay,
I think, my opinion, this is my personal opinion here today, I think Arafat has changed, without a doubt. If we look at the PLO when it was first established in the 60s, the PLO, the Palestinian Arab Covenant, states explicitly they're out to destroy Israel, to replace Israel with a Palestinian Arab state. They make it clear that the Palestinian Arab state will also allow Jews. Which Jews? This is writing in the 1960s, all Jews who lived in Palestine before 1917. which means about 3 or 4% of the Jewish population would have been allowed to stay if they achieved their goal in the 1960s, and about 97% would have been sent back to Iraq, to Germany, and to other places. Now, but what have we seen this year? This year, Arafat's talking about 2 states, a Palestinian state alongside a Jewish state. One of the problems he has is, what do you do with the existing Palestinian state? And I'm referring today of Jordan. Jordan is Palestine. It was part of the British Mandate of Palestine. When the British had one too many monarchs in Saudi Arabia, they brought up the Hashemite kingdom and they put them on the throne. But for a Palestinian, if he talks about his land being holy, the Holy Land is also Jordan. It's also everything west of the Jordan River. But so Arafat has talked about, let's have a Palestinian state, maybe a confederation with the other Palestinian state. Why they need 2 states is a problem, but that's their problem, not our problem. And then it would be alongside a Jewish state, although he doesn't define the borders. So this is moderation. But what makes us, those Israelis that would like to see their government talk with the PLO, and they include 2 ministers in the present government, are concerned. What are they concerned about? The Frege incident. Here's a Palestinian which says, let's stop the Intifada. That's what the Israelis are demanding. Let's negotiate. And what does Arafat says? You'll get shot. Keep your mouth shut. The other thing is, when Arafat spoke at the UN, he mentioned 2 things. One was Resolution 181, which the United States never mentioned. Right. This was the original partition proposal, which means basically partition Western Palestine. That would mean they would have to give up some land, but that you could live with in Israel, though most Israelis would be opposed to that. But he talks about the right of return. The right of return means that all the Palestinian refugees, let's say 400,000 in 1948, would have the right to go back to their villages and homes regardless of what's there instead of the village or instead of the home. This would mean dismembering Israel. And what scares a lot of Israelis is, it's as though he's saying to us, as I pick up this instrument in front of me, fine, let's have peace, let's have 2 states with the right of return, which means basically, Mr. Lazon or Fred Lazon or Ephraim Lazon, my name in Hebrew, take the knife, slit your own throat, and then let's live happily ever after.
Let me ask you something, and I received the signal that unfortunately we're running out of time. Okay. What brings you to America at this juncture?
Okay. I was brought here by the Chicago Zionist Federation, also by the Israeli government and the World Zionist Organization, to allow people to hear more about Israel, what's happening in Israel, what's going on in Israel. And since I've been here, I've been going around speaking to Jewish groups, non-Jewish groups, to universities, synagogues, and on programs like this.
And is it your intent to stay in Israel?
Oh yes, my intent is to stay in Israel. Unfortunately, or I feel very good, a week from today I'll be on the airplane flying back home to my wife and children and my work at the university.
And why did you choose Ben-Gurion University very quickly?
I chose Ben-Gurion University because it's a unique university, different from every other university. It's involved in the community. It's trying to change Israel for both Jews and Arabs to create a more egalitarian society, and the university is directly involved in this, whether it be our medical school or the Department of Behavioral Sciences in which I work.
Dr. Lazon, I'm sorry we're running out of time. We appreciate your coming here and giving us an American's perspective in Israel. Thank you very much.
Thank you.